Let's start with something that might make you uncomfortable to your core. Observe the world around you. Look closely without blinking. Do you see it? The streets are filled with bodies that walk with their eyes open, but with their souls completely shut off. Faces feigning emotion, mouths babbling borrowed opinions, automatic gestures repeated over and over like an empty ritual. Most of the people you pass every day feel nothing authentic. They believe in nothing that hasn't been pursued for them. They think about nothing that isn't packaged in headlines designed to domesticate their attention. I want you to imagine for a second that you could look behind their eyes. What do you think you'd find? I'll tell you without beating around the bush. A wasteland, a vast expanse of dead silence, where something resembling original thought once lived. We've reached such a grotesque point that people fear silence more than lies. They prefer constant distraction to uncomfortable clarity. Meanwhile, the soul, the invisible core that gave meaning to every gesture, is evaporating. Does that sound exaggerated? Watch how they react when the internet connection goes off. Watch how they writhe if they lose the perpetual buzz of notifications. Look at them closely. They've become flesh machines that only come to life when someone tells them what to feel, what to buy, what to hate, and what to pretend to love. This is not a metaphor. It's a real epidemic. An epidemic that doesn't cause fever or skin rashes, but a silent deterioration of consciousness. It's the epidemic that has turned attention into a resource more valuable than water, that has transformed reflection into a luxury almost no one can afford. I challenge you to think of how many people you know are capable of sitting down and contemplating their own mind without fleeing in terror. How many can look inside themselves and bear the weight of their own contradictions? How many wouldn't get lost if we switched off all the screens and ripped out all the noise? If suddenly the only sound left was the sound of their own thoughts? That is the wound no one wants to admit. We are surrounded by human beings who pretend to be human, but act like perfectly programmed automatons. And I don't say this with contempt, I say it with terror, because every day there are more of us who feel that suffocation, that suspicion that we're falling into the same pit. We are becoming what we swore we would never be, interchangeable pieces in a machine that knows nothing of conscience or truth. Have you stopped to wonder why every year you need more stimulation to feel the same? Why everything bores you faster? Why your capacity for concentration is eroding like a cliff battered by the tide? It's no accident. It's a plan with no apparent author, a faceless dynamic, a chain woven with every click, every trivial post, every conversation designed to offend no one. And here comes the truly chilling part. Every time you let yourself be dragged along by that current of noise and triviality, something dies in you. A spark of lucidity, a vestige of intellectual courage, a fragment of what was once your will. This process makes no distinctions. It doesn't matter if you pride yourself on your intelligence, if you believe you have good judgment, if you tell yourself you're different. No one is immune unless they practice active resistance. And that resistance begins by recognizing that thinking is not a secondary activity, but an act of survival. Do you dare look at the world with naked eyes? Then you will see entire legions of anesthetized souls, people who have delegated their consciousness to algorithms that decide what is relevant and what is not. Individuals who cannot distinguish information from wisdom or noise from truth. Humans who live under the illusion that they know a lot, while their capacity to question rots beneath the surface. And if this doesn't give you chills, it's because you're already contaminated. Because the first sign of this epidemic is indifference. Do you feel it? That unrest that runs down your spine as I describe this reality is the sign that something inside you still beats. And if that something survives, then there is hope. But you have to understand one thing. You will not wake up by accident. No one recovers their soul by chance. This world is designed so that you never stop moving in circles, so that you confuse distraction with happiness, so that you switch stimuli before you ask yourself an uncomfortable question, so that you never have time to wonder why you've ended up in this state. Here is the question that separates those who still retain a shred of will from those who are already mere talking shells. What would happen if you decided to stop? If you turned off all the voices competing for your attention, If instead of consuming more information, you began to dissect what you already have, would you be able to hold your own gaze without fear of discovering the void? Because this void is the only thing that grows when you stop thinking. It expands slowly, relentlessly. At first, it feels like a passing discomfort, a diffuse nostalgia for something you cannot name. But if you ignore it long enough, it devours everything. And then, yes, there is no turning back. You become one more of those bodies that walk with lost gazes, convinced they are alive just because they keep moving. And the truth, a truth so brutal that almost no one dares to speak it, is that millions of people have already crossed that threshold. Their soul has dissolved into routine. Their mind has become a mirror of the loudest opinions, and their heart beats only by inertia. Now tell me, will you be one of them? Or are you willing to reclaim what remains of you before the world turns you into another perfectly adapted robot to nothingness? Because there is something even more unsettling than that crowd of soulless bodies. The fact that all this happens not only because you lowered your guard, but because there is an entire industry dedicated to manufacturing your apathy, an invisible yet precise machine, like clockwork, whose sole purpose is to turn your consciousness into a product. And no, this is not a rhetorical metaphor. It's a real transaction. Every second of your attention is monetized, analyzed, sold, and recycled until your capacity for wonder becomes a statistic. Have you ever asked yourself why each time you open an app, you feel that mix of urgency and emptiness? Why your heart beats a little faster when you check if someone wrote to you, if someone validated you with a digital gesture? It's because your mind has been trained by a reward system you do not fully understand. They throw you dopamine crumbs with surgical precision, so each time your focus wavers, you return obediently, like a dog waiting for its piece of bread. This is the new face of ignorance, an ignorance born not of isolation, but of saturation, because no longer is it necessary to ban books or shut down schools to create a passive society. It's enough to drown you in an endless cascade of irrelevant content. Knowledge has ceased to be a path to freedom and become an accessory, a collection of loose phrases you repeat to feel smart, but that never transform into deep understanding. And do you know why? Because to truly understand something, you need time, silence, and will. And those three things are incompatible with the consumption model that has you trapped. Don't think you're an exception. Even your will to resist is contaminated by this saturation. How many times have you felt you wanted to disconnect, only for your anxiety to start poisoning you from the inside the moment you try? How many times have you decided to put your phone down, only for your brain to betray you with an irrational impulse to check if something has happened? This is no accident. It is the clearest symptom that you have been programmed. I want you to imagine your mind as a garden, a place that in its natural state is fertile, complex, full of life. Now imagine that each notification, each headline, each empty stimulus is a visitor who arrives and plants weeds. For a while you can ignore those weeds, but if you don't pull out what doesn't belong, if you don't clean your mental terrain, sooner or later the weeds cover everything and nothing authentic can grow. You only repeat ideas that others have planted. You only defend positions you don't understand. You only react according to a script you didn't write. Does it seem an exaggerated picture? Then tell me, why does the mere mention of deep thinking make your stomach churn? Why does the idea of being alone with your convictions make you uncomfortable? Because you sense that beneath all that weed, there are no roots of your own, only the remnants of others. And here lies the most perverse trap. They have convinced an entire generation that being informed is the same as being awake, as if accumulating data were enough to free you. But don't be mistaken. Intellectual freedom is not born from knowing many things, but from knowing how to discern. It is born from questioning until certainties become uncomfortable. It is born from holding on to questions without needing immediate answers. When was the last time you let a doubt mature inside you without drowning it with a quick internet search? When did you give yourself time to inhabit uncertainty without turning it into a spectacle? The reality is that the capacity to contemplate complexity is dying out. Today, anything nuanced must be reduced to a label, a slogan, an instant judgment. Because in a world designed to reward speed, The slowness of reflection is seen as a weakness. And if you dare to think slowly, if you dare to dissent from the noise, you will soon discover that your silence is more unsettling than any scream. I want you to stop and observe the paradox we're living. Never in human history have we had so much access to. If you've made it this far, I want you to know that you're a warrior. And by staying on this path, you'll connect with your higher self and become a better person every single day. So if this resonates with you, go ahead and hit subscribe. Give this video a like and tap the bell so you won't miss any of these insights that are here to help you grow. Thanks for being part of the Being of Knowledge family. Knowledge, and yet we've never been so incapable of turning that access into wisdom. Because excess information without a filter doesn't make you more lucid, it makes you more vulnerable. Knowledge without judgment is like a weapon without control. It only serves to destroy you from within. If you still retain a shred of consciousness, I invite you to feel this discomfort. Don't deny it. Don't rush to cover it with more content. Let it grow, because that discomfort is the last reminder that you're still alive, that your mind is not yet completely domesticated. But if you don't do something, if you don't choose deliberately, what will you allow into your thought? If you don't create spaces of silence for your ideas to breathe, you'll end up just like the crowd around you, programmed, empty, irrelevant. Now I want you to visualize something. Imagine yourself walking through a city at dusk. You see gigantic buildings full of lit windows. Each window shows an apparently different life. But if you watch closely, you'll discover that they're all alike. The same expressions of contained anxiety, the same looks begging for a little validation, the same learned gestures, identical consumption rituals. A perfectly synchronized choreography that no one decided to practice but that everyone performs flawlessly. Have you wondered how we got here? It wasn't overnight. It was a succession of small renunciations. Each time you traded reflection for entertainment, each time you preferred the comfort of borrowed certainty to the attention of doubt, each time you chose quick judgment instead of slow understanding. That's how you manufacture a society that seems alive but is hollow inside. And this collective void is not only an individual problem, it's a cultural virus that spreads with the speed of a pandemic. Every mind that shuts down is a contagion center, because when you stop thinking, when you stop questioning, you become a passive transmitter of any idea that sounds attractive enough. It doesn't matter if it's a lie, it doesn't matter if it's a grotesque simplification. As long as it promises to distract you from the vertigo of thinking, you'll accept it without resistance. Do you feel it now? That chill running down your spine is consciousness realizing its own fragility, because no one is completely safe. Even you, yes, you right now, are susceptible to slipping into autopilot, to becoming another docile cog in this machine that feeds on your attention. The question is whether you'll surrender or fight, whether you'll settle for being an echo or reclaim the voice that belongs to you. Because in this world, thinking is not just another task, it's an act of rebellion. And rebellion has a price, the price of loneliness, of discomfort, of uncertainty. But it is also the only path to something no one can steal from you: lucidity. And if you've made it this far, if you're still listening without looking away, it's because something inside you still resists being tamed. Something that cannot resign itself to the idea of living as an automaton, disguised as a functional person. You may not know what to call it, you may find it hard to speak it aloud, but it's that tiny voice that, even in the midst of noise, whispers that you deserve more than a simulacrum of consciousness. And that voice is dangerous, because when you listen to it carefully, everything you took for granted begins to wobble. The world becomes uncomfortable. Familiar faces stop seeming so secure. Routine loses its reassuring meaning. You begin to perceive cracks in the facades, voids in the speeches, incoherences in your own beliefs. And yes, it may scare you, because when lucidity makes its way in, it first destroys. It demolishes certainties, incinerates vanities, pulverizes the illusion that you were safe in your ignorance. But let me tell you something that no one else will, that destruction is not the end, it's the beginning. Because when all that's false burns away, there is room for the authentic. When you no longer need others to tell you who you are, you can start discovering it for yourself. When you stop consuming others' thoughts like a beggar picking up scraps, you can start generating your own. When you dare to remain in silence without distractions, without lifelines, without anesthesia, that's when you finally understand that the mind is yours and that thinking is not decorative, but your only guarantee of freedom. Maybe right now you feel that flutter in your chest. It's the vertigo of standing at the threshold of unknown territory, your own judgment. If you decide to cross that threshold, don't expect it to be easy. Don't expect applause. Society that prefers complacency to conscience does not tolerate those who step out of line. You will make people uncomfortable. You will lose some emotional belongings you once thought indispensable. They will call you strange, distant, even arrogant. And you know what? Let them. Because while they sink into a collective dream, you will have something that can't be bought, sold, or faked. The ability to look at the world and not swallow it whole. The ability to question even if no one joins you. The ability to feel even if everything around you is dead. So here's a challenge. One that won't end when you turn off this video. One that will haunt you each time you fall into the temptation to distract yourself from yourself. Ask yourself this every night before you sleep. Today, did I think something that wasn't taught to me? Did I feel something I wasn't ordered to feel? Was I master of my mind for at least an instant? If the answer is yes, even once, you are resisting. And believe me, in a world designed to turn you into an obedient consumer, that is an act of heroism. Now, if you felt even a pang of discomfort, if something I've said has shaken you to your core, I invite you to share it with someone who still retains a glimpse of lucidity. Because this conversation cannot stay buried under more stimuli. If you have the courage, leave me a comment writing the phrase that proves you've gone all the way. Silence is my resistance. I want to know how many of us refuse to be mere cogs in this machinery of mass distraction. And if you want us to keep dismantling this great farce together, subscribe. Here you will not find the same recycled content you see everywhere. Here you will find an uncomfortable space. Uncomfortable because it forces you to think. Because thinking, though it hurts, remains the only way to feel alive. Now close your eyes for a moment. Listen to your breath. Feel how beneath all this noise, there is a core they have not managed to extinguish. Open it as one would open a forbidden book and remember this. The more you dare to look into the void, the more you will discover that it was never empty, but waiting for you to arrive. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for daring to question. I will see you soon. Or perhaps not, because some paths can only be walked alone. But if you choose to return, I will be here, sowing fires in the minds that still dare to burn. Until then, remember, thinking is an act of resistance, and you have just begun your own silent revolution. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something within you awaken, don't stop here. Subscribe to the Being of Knowledge and become part of a community of silent strategists, of awakened minds who no longer fall for masks. Like this video if it brought you clarity, and share it with those who also need to open their eyes. Because true power begins with one decision: to never be the same again. Thank you for watching.